Hello, let me tell you about a story about a detective called Mason. He had a brilliant idea for investigating crime scenes. The idea wasn't his, of course. It had been used for years and years and could have been forgotten about, but different investigators still use it when investigating crime scenes. The idea is creating a miniature model of the whole crime scene. For instance, if it was a farmhouse with 2 people and one stabbed with a knife, then create a model of that entire scene. Mason used to find it very helpful to be able to look at the model of the crime scene and go through it in his mind what could have happened. This method helped Mason solve lots of different crimes. Mason's wife Susan was a teacher in the local school and used to often worry about Mason out and about in his job, but she used to like when he was in the basement with his crime scene miniatures because she knew he was safe at home and wasn't in the way of any criminal that could harm him or worse, kill him. One day there was a murder in the school and Mason had to do a miniature of the hallway by the lockers where the murder took place. He knew that there was just lockers, a school bag and a boy that seemed to have been hit by a hammer. Mason was working hard trying to figure out what he could see in it. Sometimes he wondered, was it harder there being a lot to the scene or less? But he knew one thing, that no matter how much there was in the scene or how little, it seemed to help him having a miniature model. That night Mason seemed to have had a nightmare and woke up feeling agitated after it. He got up to get a glass of water. On his way, by accident, he knocked against his wife's handbag and it fell to the floor, with some of its contents spilt out on the floor. He froze in fear when he saw what he saw staring up at him from the floor. It was a hammer with what looked like blood on the top. He looked back at the bed, hoping Susan wouldn't wake up. He put it together. Susan had been talking about a boy who was constantly bullying her behind people's backs, and she was afraid to tell anyone because she felt they would think she had no control over her students. Mason knew the student was hit with a blunt object, which was very highly likely to be the hammer. Mason felt movement from the bed and quickly put the hammer back into Susan's bag. He went down to the kitchen and drank some water and then walked back to the basement and looked at the miniature model. He imagined Susan striking the student on the head with a hammer and knew that he heard the CCTV footage was missing, and that would be explained by Susan being able to have access to it to delete it. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. Suddenly he heard movement behind him and looked around. His wife Susan was standing next to him with a miniature model of himself lying in a pool of blood. She put the miniature model of him down on the ground and said, "Well, Mason, I was really hoping it wouldn't come to this, where I have to finish this miniature crime scene, but it looks like I'll have to make the background or basement." She pulled out a gun and shot Mason in his head. 6 months later, Susan was speaking at the book launch of her bestseller called My Husband is Gone, But I Continued His Passion. She spoke into the mic with emotion. "I am here today talking about my book, which is a way of me coping with the murder of my hard-working husband, who was passionate about figuring out ways of solving crimes by using miniature crime scene models. The title is long, but I couldn't think of any other appropriate title to use other than My Husband is Gone, But I Continued His Passion. My husband was such a loving man, and the only time I was truly content with him working on his investigations was when he was in the basement working on his miniature crime scene models. After my husband died, I tried to harness my emotions into making a miniature crime scene of him in honor of him. I would love if my husband was still alive and I didn't have to write this book, but I want to speak out to the many wives of men like my husband. Don't take a day for granted, because if your husband is working in a dangerous line of work like mine was, then his life could be snuffed out at any minute. The crowd were lapping up Susan's speech, and Susan was enjoying knowing she would get lots of royalties from her books and TV appearances, etc., and her bully was out of the way. She paused for a moment, thinking to herself, I didn't want to appear a pushover teacher by saying I couldn't control my student, and I didn't want to harm my loving husband, but I had to. I wasn't a murderer, so it's better I got a book deal and wasn't cut out as the murderer. They would think I was some sort of psycho. She saw a fly land in her hand and thought to herself, after all, I wouldn't hurt a fly. Jeff was a very nice guy who wouldn't harm a fly, but one day he met a psychopath who offered him $1 million if he wouldn't kill his own twin within 3 days of an experiment. Jeff laughed at the idea, knowing he would never ever harm his twin, as he was the only person he truly cared about in the whole wide world. Jeff's parents unfortunately died in a car crash 5 years ago. Jeff also needed the money to pay off his mortgage and other bills he had outstanding, so the idea of being offered $1 million for not killing his own twin was too good to be true. Jeff even told his twin Darren about the idea, and Darren said, "Go for it." Jeff knew in his right mind he wouldn't kill his twin, but he feared they would drug him or something to drive him crazy, and he took every precaution his twin would be safe, and then he would collect his $1 million and they both would forget about their crazy plan. The first day the experiment started, Jeff was put into a white room. There was no chair or table or anything else, just a plain white room. After a while, Jeff felt dizzy and faint without any food, and the whiteness drove him crazy. Eventually he tried to lie down to get some sleep, but as soon as he did, loud music came into the room. He didn't even have a clue where the music was coming from, as he saw no speakers. The next day he woke up, and one of the walls was replaced with a huge mirror, so he could see himself in the mirror. He stared at himself and realized how tired he looked. When he went to sleep, he slept sound until he woke up. Darren's voice filled the room through the hidden speakers. "Well done, Jeff. You are doing great. This is day 3. You've just a few hours before you collect your $1 million. Good luck." Suddenly more loud music filled the room, and this time it seemed to be so loud he was wondering why the mirror didn't crack. Suddenly it stopped, and Darren's voice filled the room again. "Okay, Jeff, you're doing extremely good, but you might wonder why the mirror didn't crack. That is because it was reinforced, bulletproof glass that wasn't affected by the noise. But there will be a gun appear on the ground just now. You just need to make 10 different movements in the mirror and then shoot your reflection. Then you are free to go. Also, don't be surprised when the glass breaks, as the bulletproof cover to the mirror was lifted, so it's just an ordinary mirror now. Jeff made 10 different movements and lifted the gun and shot the glass. He then froze when he realized on the other side of the glass his reflection wasn't him standing holding a gun. It was him lying down dead on the ground. Darren walked into view and said, "Well now, Jeff, I guess you won't be getting your 1 million. You see, I told a little white lie. Maybe, I'm not sure, or was it I left out some very important detail concerning you? That mirror was a mirror, yes, and you were looking at your reflection. But when I had lifted the bulletproof shield, it was the mirror that lifted. What you were looking at, making those 10 movements, that you thought was a reflection of you, was really your twin. He had no idea what I said to you, but my twin Jason was telling him that if he copied every move you did in sync with you in the next 10 movements, you will be out of here. And you see, he didn't realize I meant you'd be out of here dead. I'm sorry, Jeff, I can't have you walking out here alive and blabbing all about my little experiment. But before I kill you, didn't I tell you I'd make you kill your own twin within 3 days?" Then Darren lifted the gun and shot Jeff in his head. Hello, my name is Martin. It was a sunny day in June. Me and my friends were visiting a local park where there was a very big house and a beautiful garden. The house was open up for visitors to look around, and there was a shop and even a restaurant. I am a huge fan of mazes, but was never in one in real life. I just did them in books and comics or wherever I came across one. The main reason I wanted to visit this park house was because I knew there was a maze there. When me and my friends arrived at the maze, I was so excited, but I felt that excitement drain away when my friends said they weren't going in because they heard a story that one time a boy our age went in there and was never seen again. I told them that it was just a silly urban legend that wasn't true, but they were adamant they weren't going in. I could see the fear in their eyes, and I couldn't understand why. I told them, okay, if you want to spoil the party, that's okay, but I'm going in and enjoying the maze. Besides, if anyone was going missing in there, don't you think we would have heard of a lot more people going missing? I walked in and was amazed at how high the ditches were. I could feel the excitement overcome me. I felt that my friends were missing out so much, but suddenly, after a half an hour walking around there, I felt for the first time a pang of fear, and a few minutes after that, I wish I hadn't gone in. I shouted out loud to my friends, but all I could hear was the echo of my voice fill the air. I suddenly got the weirdest feeling someone was watching me. I panicked, thinking it was the boy who vanished, who my friends were telling me about. I walked around and around and around. I had enough of the maze now. I wanted to get to the exit to get out of it. Suddenly, I heard some shouting, and to my relief, I realized it was my friend Sarah. When I got out of the maze, I acted like I wasn't afraid and said, "That maze is so cool. I was walking around for hours, it seemed like, and I genuinely couldn't find my way out. They must have designed this maze so well. That night I was in my room, but that was when the weirdest thing had happened. I walked out of my room, and when I walked into, which should have been my hall, I was in my room again. I suddenly saw a door in another direction, and once again when I entered it, I was in my room. This kept happening over and over and over. I could not make any sense of it, because I could look back and see my room, and turn around and look in the door and see my room again. I was panicking, thinking of the maze, knowing what was happening to me in there is happening to me right now in my own bedroom. Suddenly I fell over something when I was going through the door. It was a book. I picked it up, and the title read, The Maze. I opened it up and read the first page, and a shiver ran up my spine. The publishing date was 2020, and the year at the time was 2010. I looked at the writer's name, and it was my best friend Sarah. Then I read, 10 years ago, my friend entered a maze that me and my friend warned him about, and he never was seen again. We had warned him of exactly the same thing happening another boy years ago, who we cannot find out who it is. I stopped reading, then jumped when I heard a voice behind me. I turned around. My dad was staring right in front of me and said, "Son, don't be afraid. That maze gave you a secret magic that will make up for any friends you may never have seen again. You will understand as time goes on. I know, trust me, I was that other boy that went missing."
I let myself go blind. When I was 25, I was told that my sight would fade away like a TV losing signal. Hard shapes would turn soft, and eventually they would be nothing but a current of running colors. Then black. More than black. Nothing. Hard to describe nothing. But that's what I see. But it didn't have to be this way. Not yet. If I was diligent with my medication, if I followed the set schedule and paid attention to the signs that my body was giving me, it could have been decades before I lost my sight. I could lead a full, happy life if I chose. That was 7 years ago. I never took a pill or went to an appointment. I never tried to save my eyes, and I was glad to have them rot. The food deliveries come weekly. Everything I need is brought right to my door, and the things I don't are taken care of without my having to step a foot in the hallway or even take my trash to the garbage chute. The world beyond my door is unknown. In my apartment, I know every inch of the floor, every corner, every bureau and coffee table. I can move around without a walking stick. I can even jog if my phone is ringing in a distant room. I have no fear of getting hurt like I did in the early days of my disability. I live here on my own. I am safe. I am content. When I do speak to people, on the rare occasion where I must, they always ask, what happened? But I can't tell them it was preventable. They wouldn't understand. I woke in the middle of the night. I had been in a deep sleep when I woke. I wasn't tired or groggy, but my heart was pushing against my chest in heavy thuds, like it was trying to break through the bones that kept it safe. I didn't remember having any bad dreams. Why was I so scared? Or was I? My body behaved as if I was terrified, but my mind had no way to place it. I lay there and hoped I would eventually be able to calm down. I forced myself to slow my breathing I gripped the sheets under my grimy palms. It worked. The chills on my back warmed. My anxiety dripped from me in thick waves of sweat staining the mattress beneath me. Now that I could feel my body calm down, I felt something else. Something mundane. I had to pee. I smiled. A thought like that can only occur to somebody who's not in danger. It had all been in my head, some forgotten dream. So I hurried to the bathroom. Before I knew what happened, I was falling. My shins had smashed into something in the middle of the room. 3 of my fingers bent back and cracked beneath the weight of my body as I dropped to the floor. My head knocked against the hard wood, and for a moment I lost track of where I was. The pain in my hand was so blinding I could hardly think. But when I did think, when I did come back to my senses, body still throbbing, I only had one thought. The coffee table had moved. I didn't want to believe this. I didn't want to remember. But I knew. There was no mystery here. I knew who had done this. In a way, I'd been waiting for this day for a long time. I had been waiting for her. I picked myself up, the broken fingers cradled like a bloody claw in my hand, and limped crooked to the bathroom, careful not to run into anything else along the way. The apartment was foreign to me now. This was no longer a home. It was a foxhole. I locked the door and ran the cold water, letting it numb my hand. For a moment, the relief was so great, I almost forgot to be afraid. When that moment passed, I realized I hadn't checked the bathroom to make sure I was alone. I listened. She was here. I could hear the shower curtain blowing forward and easing back like a flag pushed by a chilled breeze. My heart locked like the first time I saw her. It was the clearest memory I had of my life before losing my sight. I was a child. My sister and I had been playing a game in the living room during a storm, which caused a blackout. Without TV, games were all we had to keep ourselves entertained. When we had finished all the regulars, ending with Battleship, it was time to go over something more substantial. We decided on finally finishing a full game of Monopoly, which meant I would have to go to the basement. I remember the sound of thunder, like some creature roaring in the dark. I could even smell the rain, but the storm didn't scare me. I wasn't afraid of anything at that age, not even the basement. The light was very bright since my father had replaced the single bulb with a set of fluorescent tubes. The stairs, which had once been rotting wood, were now metal steps, and the silver surface caught the white lights in such a way to make you feel like you were going down into a spaceship. The floor was cement, newly finished and bright gray. There was nothing to be afraid of. I moved to the shelf where the game sat and ran my fingers along the boxes until I found Monopoly. She was already there, sitting against the wall, holding her knees, her face buried between them. At first I wasn't afraid because I didn't understand. She wore a white dress, though the bottoms were caked in mud. I opened my mouth to speak. She lifted up her eyes to meet mine. They were full of tears and mourning. But when she saw me, she blinked the sadness away, and all that was left was hate. She stood. I ran up the stairs, screaming for my mom. When I told her what I had seen, she took me by the hand and led me back down the stairs, pulling me by the wrist, nearly popping my shoulder out of the socket. With each step we took, the air in my lungs was taken from me as if we were going underwater, as if my mother was trying to drown me. She tried to explain. She knew there was no one here. She had already come down to the basement. She already checked every inch of it. It was empty, she told me. But I wouldn't let it go. I knew what I saw. And so she dragged me, screaming and wailing, down and down, one step at a time. And as we went, I looked to the corner where the woman had been. First I saw her feet, bare and bloodied, then the muddy dress, and the sharp nails spiking from each finger. "See?" my mother said, pointing to the woman. "There's no one here. Nothing. It's your imagination." I couldn't move. I only stared. When I said nothing, my mother let go of my hand and marched back up the stairs, mistaking my fear for resignation. She left me there on my own. And as soon as she was gone from sight, the woman in the basement attacked me. I spent weeks, sometimes months of my childhood in hospitals after that day, with doctors trying to understand my seizures. But how can a seizure break bones or leave scratches all over my body? I eventually stopped telling them what I saw. The medicine they gave me only made me drowsy. But it never stopped the attacks. And then one day, like a miracle from heaven, I was told I would go blind. No one understood my calm, my quiet acceptance. My friends begged me to take my medication, to take care of myself. But I knew that this was the only way to stop her from attacking me. She only came when I saw her, only when my eyes met hers. One by one, my friends fell away. I stopped leaving the house as my sight got worse, and I had no one to help me navigate the world beyond my door. The attack stopped. I was right. Or at least I had been until tonight. She was there, just behind me. I heard the crinkling of the plastic shower curtain, the broken exhale of the shallow breaths. Slow and steady as I could, I opened the bathroom door and limped my way through the living room, my legs brushing the coffee table I had tripped over. The door to the corridor outside my apartment was only 7 steps from where I stood. I imagined myself going through it, hurrying down the hall and the staircase. It had been so long since I stepped foot outside my apartment, I wasn't sure I could even find the stairs. And if I did, if I reached the street, I would have no one to call. Nowhere to go. I had so expertly separated myself from the world that I could find myself entirely alone, even on a crowded street. So I stood there, 7 steps from escape, and did not move an inch. The bathroom door creaked as it fell open. The floorboards whined closer and closer to me. "Why now?" I asked out loud. In that moment, I understood. This had been her plan. All my life, I had been with people, from my parents to doctors, teachers, friends. I had never been alone. Not until I moved and let my sight fade. She had been waiting all these years while I cultivated a life of solitude, as if waiting for a fruit to ripen. She had been waiting for the moment when, even if I could run, I didn't have the knowledge or means to escape her. And even if I did, I had no one to call, no place to go. I had done this to myself. I had built a trap, and now, with ease and delight, she sprung it. Her chilled breath blew on my neck. Cold. It was ice cold.
Susie was walking down the road one night in the countryside when she was surprised by hearing a phone box ring. She wondered who would be calling a public phone box, especially in the middle of nowhere. Well, it was near a bus stop, but besides that, no one was around, unless they were waiting for the bus, of course. She had decided to answer the phone when she was surprised to hear a man's voice. "Hello, is anyone there?" Susie said. "Hello, yes, I'm here. I'm sure you must have the wrong number. This is a public phone box." The man spoke again. "Oh, maybe I did call the wrong number, but thank you very much for answering and letting me know. I must say, you have a very nice voice. I am very sorry if I put you out of your way, but it was very nice to speak to you anyway. I guess you must be wondering why I'm calling a public phone box. Well, it was very nice to speak to you. I hope you're having a good night." Susie felt strange, a stranger calling a phone box, asking her was she having a good night, but she liked how he spoke, so replied, "Yes, I'm having a great night, thanks for asking. I'm just waiting for the bus to go home now." The man said, "Oh, I'm very glad to hear you're having a good night. So the public phone box is near a bus stop then, I gather." Susie was enjoying the chat with the man, but realised the bus was coming, so quickly said, "I'm very sorry, I have to go. The bus is coming. It was nice talking to you. Bye." The man said, "It was very splendid talking to you also. Bye now." Susie walked into the bus and felt happy for some strange reason. About the phone call, the man had left a good impression on her. She was wondering, was it his voice or what he said, and she wondered what he had looked like. When she got home, she told her sister Rachel all about it. "I was waiting for the 10 o'clock bus, and well, I was very surprised to hear the public phone ring in the phone box right next to the bus stop. I answered it, and there was this really sweet man on the other end. And, well, we had a lovely chat, but unfortunately the bus came before I could even tell him my name." Her sister smiled and said, "Wow, what age was he? I wonder what he looked like. Maybe he looked like a film star." Susie said, "I'm not sure what age he was, and of course I have no idea what he looked like, but he seemed so sweet." Rachel said, "Are you going to wait at the bus stop again tomorrow night to see if he calls? How do you expect him to call the same phone box again at the same time? It obviously was a wrong number he dialed." But the next night Susie made sure to be waiting for the 10 o'clock bus again, and was pleasantly surprised when the phone rang again. She ran into it and answered, "Hello?" "Hello, Susie. I am very happy that you were waiting for the bus again, and you answered the phone. I was hoping you would. I hope you're happy that I rang this phone again. Are you, Susie?" Susie said, "Well, yes, I kind of enjoyed speaking to you last night." The man said, "Well, that is splendid. Our feelings are mutual then. Tell me, Susie, is there anyone else waiting for the bus? Are you alone?" Susie said, "Yes, I'm alone. This is a very quiet road, you see. Not many people ever wait for this bus." The man said, "Oh, it must be in the middle of the country then, Susie, since not many people catch the bus." Susie saw the bus coming up the road and said to the man, "I'm sorry, the bus is here." The man said, "How about we continue our conversation tomorrow night? Same time, Susie?" Susie agreed. The next night at the same time, the phone rang again. The man said, "Susie, I'm not sure I even told you my name. My name is Fred, Susie, and do you know, I love your voice, but I would love to be able to put a face to that voice. How about we meet in person, Susie? Would you like that?" Susie thought about it, then quickly said, "Well, yes, if you would like that, sure." She gave him the directions to the phone booth and told him she would meet him at 9:30 tomorrow night. Back at Susie's house, her dad was reading a newspaper article about a serial killer at large in their locality, and the surrounding areas of the countryside around their village. He was worried she was out late and was just about to call the police when she had walked in the door. Susie felt a strange feeling. It was like she was in love. She felt it strange knowing that she hadn't even met the man, but still felt strangely in love with him. She told her sister about her meeting him tomorrow night. The next day, when Susie asked to go out, her dad said, "No way, you're not going anywhere tonight." Susie was mad until her sister had an idea that maybe he would allow both girls go to the cinema together. Rachel was going to the cinema while Susie would meet the man. Rachel said to Susie, "Look, Susie, I was thinking about this. Maybe it's a bad idea. You were going to meet this man. I mean, he could be anyone. He could be a madman for all we know." Susie laughed it off and said she would meet him and was sure he would be a really sweet guy. When Susie was on the bus, she heard a conversation between two people who were talking about a serial killer at large, a man who was targeting young women. Susie felt sick thinking of the stranger she was about to meet. She stayed on the bus and knew she couldn't go home, so she would go back to the cinema and join Rachel. But Rachel was worried about her sister and had already gone to meet her by the phone box. When Rachel was outside the phone box, she had been calling her sister's name, but all she could hear was her own echo. Suddenly a man walked out from the ditch and said, "Hello, Susie. It is so great to finally meet you." Rachel froze as the man went near her and she kicked him. The man said, "Oh, now, that's very nasty out of you, Susie. Very nasty indeed, and I have to punish you for that." He dragged her into his car and put her in the boot and shut it. It was a Friday night and I was scrolling through my phone when I opened the TikTok app. I scrolled through it, then noticed I had a message. I opened the message and it was from a guy called Frank. He said, "You were looking beautiful at the mall today." I blocked him instantly as I felt a shiver run up my spine. I just put it down to some creep trying to freak me out, so I didn't pay much more attention to it. The next day I was in the mall with my friends, and we were just walking after coming down the escalator when a man was standing in front of me as I got off. I said, "Excuse me," very politely. He turned around and said, "I'm very sorry for blocking you. Please pass." His words, "very sorry for blocking you," sounded so creepy. It felt as if he was the guy who had sent me the message last night. But how could that be? I told my friends, and they agreed it all sounded a bit creepy the way he worded it. I was hoping it was just a coincidence. That night when I went home, I received another message, which must have been the same guy. This time he said, "You shouldn't have blocked me." He must have set up a new account to just send me that. I jumped when I suddenly heard a noise outside my door. There was a piece of wood stuck up against it, with "You're blocked" written on it. I was shaking with fear and went to my window to try to get out, but I knew it was too high, and when I looked down, I could see the man below from the mall staring right up at me. I rang the police and stayed in my room until they came. When they arrived, the wood was gone from my door, and the man was nowhere to to be seen. I couldn't understand the wood disappearing from my door. Then suddenly I woke up. Everything was dark. I know now what woke me. It was my phone. I answered it and could hear a man's voice. As I was saying, "You shouldn't have blocked me." I screamed, "Let me out, let me out." The man said, "There is a straw in your coffin underground. I will be taking that straw out in just under 5 minutes. There had been oxygen pumped into your coffin, but when that's gone, I'm afraid you're on your own. But I threw you a lifeline. I sent your friend a message on TikTok, telling her where you are. If they're a real friend, they will find their way here to save you. But then again, they will need to bring a shovel, etc. So the time is ticking. Tick tock, tick tock," he said in a very creepy voice. Then there was silence. What seemed like an hour later, I could hear police sirens, and I thanked God my friend had rang them and got here on time. I was afraid after that to ever go on TikTok again. The man's voice rang in my ears. Tick tock, tick tock.